A video where an elderly grandmother beats a veteran with her purse for hanging a flag went viral with 20 million views. But what the cameras didn't capture in those 30 seconds would shock the entire world. Hey everyone, welcome back to Stories of General Dave. I'm about to tell you a story that will completely change how you think about viral videos and the truth behind them. But first, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because stories like this don't come around often. Before we dive in, I want you to engage with me. Write in the comments how old you are and what city you're from. I read every single comment and love connecting with you all. The morning of August 15th started like any other Tuesday for James Patterson, a 62-year-old Navy veteran living in Millbrook, Alabama. He'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a hospital corpsman, saving lives under enemy fire, earning a Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts. Now he worked at the local hardware store, lived alone in a small rental house, and kept to himself. James had one ritual that meant everything to him. Every morning, at exactly 7 a.m., he would step outside his front door and raise the American flag on the pole he'd installed in his tiny yard. Not because the law required it, not because his neighbors expected it, but because it was his way of honoring the brothers who never made it home. The ritual began with a moment of silence, standing at attention despite the arthritis that made his joints ache. He would think about Marcus Williams, his best friend and fellow corpsman, who had died trying to save a wounded Marine during their second deployment. He would think about Sergeant Rodriguez, who had stepped on an IED 3 days before they were supposed to go home. He would think about all 27 names on the memorial wall back at Camp Chapman. The flag itself was special. It had flown over Forward Operating Base Chapman in Afghanistan for 18 months, through sandstorms and mortar attacks, through Memorial Day ceremonies for fallen soldiers, and 4th of July celebrations that felt hollow without the friends who should have been there. The flag was faded, with small tears from the desert wind and shrapnel damage from the attack that killed Marcus. But James treated it like the most precious thing he owned. He'd tried to explain this to neighbors before, when they'd made comments about the flag's condition. But how do you explain to someone who's never been to war that the tears in fabric can represent the tears you never shed? How do you tell a civilian that replacing a memorial flag feels like erasing the memory of everyone who died under it? His neighbor, 80-year-old Dorothy Henley, had been complaining about the flag for months. "That raggedy thing is bringing down property values," she told other neighbors. "He needs to buy a new one or take it down entirely." What Dorothy didn't understand, what she refused to listen to when James tried to explain, was that the flag's condition wasn't neglect, it was history. Every fade mark told a story. Every small tear represented a memory of fallen friends. To Dorothy, who had grown up during World War II when flag etiquette was drilled into every American child, a damaged flag was simply disrespectful, period. The tension between them had been building for months. Dorothy would make passive-aggressive comments to other neighbors about people who don't take care of their flags properly. She'd called the city twice to ask if there were ordinances about flag maintenance. She'd even contacted the local VFW to complain about James, not knowing that he was a member in good standing who donated 10% of his disability check to veteran causes every month. Other neighbors had tried to mediate. Sarah Martinez, who lived between their houses, had attempted to explain to Dorothy that James was a veteran and the flag had special meaning. But Dorothy's response was always the same. "I don't care if he's George Washington himself. Proper Americans take care of their flags." The confrontation that would change both their lives forever began at 7:03 a.m. on that Tuesday morning. James stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, walking toward his flagpole, as he had every day for the past 3 years. The morning was peaceful, birds singing, a gentle breeze rustling through the oak trees lining Maple Street. That's when Dorothy Henley marched across the property line, her leather purse swinging from her arm like a weapon. "I told you to take down that eyesore," she snapped, pointing at the flag with disgust. "It's disrespectful to fly a torn flag. You're embarrassing the whole neighborhood." James stopped walking, his coffee mug trembling slightly in his hands. "Mrs. Henley, I've explained this before. This flag has special meaning." "I don't care about your stories," Dorothy interrupted. follow the flag code or take it down. Period. What happened next would be captured on 3 different cell phone cameras and shared across every social media platform within hours. James began explaining, his voice patient despite his frustration, about the flag's significance, about Marcus, about why replacing it would feel like betraying his friend's memory. He told her about the ceremony where his commanding officer had presented him with the flag, about the chaplain's blessing, about the names of the fallen written in permanent marker on a corner that was hidden when the flag was properly displayed. Dorothy wasn't interested in listening. She'd heard what she considered excuses before, and her mind was made up. "You're just making excuses," she said, raising her voice loud enough to wake the neighbors. "Proper Americans take care of their flags. You're dishonoring our country with that trash, and I won't stand for it anymore." The irony of being lectured about patriotism by someone who'd never served wasn't lost on James, but he kept his temper in check. His therapist at the VA had taught him breathing techniques for moments like this, when civilian attitudes about military service made his blood pressure spike. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've served this country for 12 years. That's when Dorothy Henley lost her mind. Hit that like button if this story has got you hooked, because what Dorothy did next shocked everyone who witnessed it. "I don't care if you served or not," Dorothy screamed, her face red with rage. "That doesn't give you the right to fly garbage in my neighborhood." She lunged toward the flagpole, attempting to tear down the flag with her bare hands. When James stepped forward to stop her, she spun around and began beating him with her leather purse. The attack lasted 30 seconds. Dorothy Henley, all 4 feet 11 inches of her, swinging her purse with surprising force while screaming about flag etiquette and property values. James Patterson, a decorated war veteran who had survived 3 deployments and countless firefights, standing there taking the beating rather than defending himself against an elderly woman. The purse was heavy. Dorothy carried everything from reading glasses to a hardcover prayer book inside it, and each blow stung. But what hurt James more than the physical assault was the humiliation. Here he was, a man who had earned a Silver Star for valor under fire, being attacked by a neighbor while other neighbors watched through their windows. James could have easily stopped Dorothy. His military training and superior size meant he could have restrained her without causing harm. But something about fighting back against an elderly woman, regardless of the circumstances, felt wrong. So he stood there, protecting his face with his arms, waiting for it to end. Neighbor Sarah Martinez captured the whole thing on her iPhone while calling 911. 17-year-old Tyler Brooks filmed it from his bedroom window and posted it to TikTok before the police even arrived. Mrs. Chen from across the street got the clearest footage and immediately uploaded it to Facebook. Within 6 hours, the video had been shared 50,000 times. Within 24 hours, it had reached 2 million views. By the end of the week, it had exploded to 20 million views across all platforms. The comments were brutal, and they kept getting worse as the video spread to different platforms and demographics. Veteran gets owned by grandma for disrespecting flag. This is what happens when you don't follow proper flag etiquette. Elderly patriot teaches veteran about respect. Finally, someone stands up to these entitled military types. Bet this guy never even saw real combat. Stolen valor, probably. Real veterans know how to treat the flag. The narrative was set. Angry veteran gets put in his place by patriotic grandmother who cares more about the flag than he does. James Patterson became a national symbol of veteran entitlement and disrespect. The context, the backstory, the meaning behind his memorial flag, none of that mattered. The internet had seen 30 seconds of video and made its judgment. News outlets picked up the story within hours. Veteran confronted by elderly neighbor over torn flag was trending on Twitter. Cable news shows debated whether James was in the wrong for flying a damaged flag. Veterans groups distanced themselves from him. The American Legion post in Millbrook asked him to stay away until the controversy died down. James lost his job at the hardware store 2 days later. Too much negative attention, his boss explained apologetically. Corporate called this morning. Customers are complaining, threatening boycotts. We can't afford the bad publicity right now. the job loss hit harder than the viral humiliation. James had worked at Miller's Hardware for 8 years, ever since moving to Millbrook. It wasn't just employment, it was community, routine, purpose. He knew every regular customer by name, could recommend the exact bolt or paint color for any project. Now that was gone, sacrificed to the internet's need for viral villains. He stopped leaving his house except for grocery runs and VA appointments. When he did venture out, people recognized him from the viral video. Some confronted him directly, lecturing him about flag etiquette and military honor. Others just stared and whispered, pulling out their phones to capture the flag guy in public. The grocery store became a gauntlet of shame. Whispered comments followed him through every aisle. "That's him. Can you believe it? My grandfather would roll over in his grave." James started shopping at odd hours, hoping to avoid crowds, but there was always someone who recognized him. The flag still flew on his pole, but now it felt more like a target than a tribute. Every morning when he performed his ritual, James wondered if someone was filming him, waiting for another moment to go viral. Dorothy Henley became a folk hero overnight. She was invited on 3 different morning shows to discuss proper patriotism and holding veterans accountable. She started a GoFundMe page to educate disrespectful veterans about flag etiquette. That raised $12,000 in a week. But something was bothering Sarah Martinez, the neighbor who'd filmed the original confrontation. Sarah was a military wife. Her husband deployed with the army in Germany, and something about the whole situation felt wrong. She'd watched James for 3 years, seen his quiet dignity, his careful attention to the flag ceremony each morning. She'd seen him help elderly neighbors with yard work, shovel snow from sidewalks without being asked, and quietly slip cash to the family down the street when the father lost his job. She'd never seen him be disrespectful about anything, let alone the flag. The man who performed a reverent morning ceremony 7 days a week, rain or shine, wasn't the type to dishonor military symbols. There had to be more to the story. So Sarah started digging. She reached out to James's former unit, trying to understand the story behind his flag. She contacted the VA to learn about his service record. She spent hours researching flag etiquette and the meaning behind battle-worn flags. What she discovered would completely destroy the narrative that had made Dorothy Henley famous. What would you do in Sarah's place? Would you stay silent or risk becoming the next viral villain? The flag that Dorothy Henley had called garbage wasn't just any flag. It was a memorial flag, formally presented to James Patterson by the commanding officer of Forward Operating Base Chapman, in a ceremony honoring fallen soldiers. The tears in the fabric weren't from neglect, they were from shrapnel damage sustained during the mortar attack that killed hospital corpsman Marcus Williams, James's best friend and roommate. The fading wasn't from weather exposure, it was from the dust and smoke of a war zone where that flag had flown for 18 months over a field hospital where James had saved 43 American lives. The flag had been blessed by a military chaplain, signed by every member of James's unit, and formally retired from active service with full military honors. Under federal law and military tradition, memorial flags are allowed to be flown in any condition as a remembrance of fallen service members. Dorothy Henley hadn't just beaten a veteran for flying a torn flag. She'd beaten a veteran for honoring his dead friend with a sacred military memorial. Sarah Martinez spent 2 weeks gathering documentation, interviewing James's former unit members via video calls, and building an ironclad case for the true story. She had photographs of the flag ceremony in Afghanistan, official military documents confirming the flag's memorial status, and testimonies from 12 veterans who'd served with James. But she was terrified to release the information. The internet had already made its judgment. Dorothy was the hero, James was the villain, and anyone who challenged that narrative risked becoming the next target of online mob justice. Sarah had seen what happened to people who went against viral stories: death threats, harassment, job loss, family intimidation. Her husband called from Germany after seeing the viral video. "Sarah, I know you filmed this, but please don't get involved. These internet pile-ons destroy people. Just let it go." But Sarah couldn't let it go. Every time she saw another news segment praising Dorothy Henley's patriotism, Every time she read another comment calling James a disrespectful veteran, she felt sick to her stomach. The breaking point came when Sarah saw James at the grocery store, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, moving quickly through the aisles, clearly trying to avoid being recognized. In the checkout line, a teenager spotted him. "Hey, aren't you the flag guy? The one who got schooled by that old lady?" James nodded without speaking, his face flushing with shame. "My dad says you're a disgrace to the military. Says you should know better than to fly a piece of trash." James paid for his groceries and left without responding, but Sarah saw his hand shaking as he walked away. That night, she made her decision. Sarah uploaded a 20-minute video to YouTube titled "The Truth About the Viral Flag Video." She laid out every piece of evidence she'd gathered, explained the significance of memorial flags, and shared the real story behind James Patterson's service and sacrifice. The video went viral faster than the original confrontation. Within 12 hours, it had 3 million views. Within 48 hours, major news outlets were calling Sarah for interviews. Veterans organizations that had distanced themselves from James were now calling him a hero. The American Legion Post issued a formal apology and invited him back with full honors. But the most dramatic change came in the comment sections of the original videos. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next, because Dorothy Henley's response to learning the truth would shock everyone who thought they knew her story. The tide of public opinion shifted so fast it gave people whiplash. The same platforms that had celebrated Dorothy's patriotism were now calling her a military-hating monster. Death threats flooded her social media accounts. Protesters gathered outside her house. Someone threw eggs at her windows and spray-painted veteran hater on her garage door. Dorothy Henley went from folk hero to national villain in 72 hours. But Sarah Martinez's investigation had uncovered something else, something that would complicate the story even further. Dorothy Henley's late husband, Robert, had been a Marine who died in Vietnam in 1967. Dorothy had been 19 years old, pregnant with their first child, when she received the folded flag from his funeral. She'd treasured that flag for 57 years, keeping it in a glass case in her living room, never allowing anyone to touch it. The flag James flew reminded Dorothy of her husband's memorial flag, but seeing it torn and faded triggered something deep and painful in her memory. In her mind, a damaged flag wasn't a memorial, it was a desecration of everything her husband had died for. Dorothy hadn't attacked James out of malice or lack of patriotism. She'd attacked him because seeing that torn flag every day felt like watching her husband's memory being destroyed all over again. When Sarah discovered this information and included it in a follow-up video, the internet once again didn't know how to react. Was Dorothy a grieving widow protecting her husband's memory, or was she still wrong for attacking a veteran? Was James the victim of an unstable woman's trauma, or was this a tragic misunderstanding between two people honoring military service in different ways? The story became even more complicated when local news interviewed Dorothy's daughter, Linda Morrison, who revealed that her mother had been struggling with early-stage dementia for the past year. "Mom gets confused sometimes," Linda explained through tears. "She sees Dad's flag every day and talks to it like he's still alive. I think seeing Mr. Patterson's flag damaged, it must have felt like someone was hurting Dad." The revelation changed everything again. Suddenly, Dorothy wasn't a villain or a heroine, was a woman suffering from a disease that was stealing her memories and judgment while leaving her emotions raw and unfiltered. What do you think Dorothy deserves now that you know the full story? Was she responsible for her actions, or was this a tragedy that hurt everyone involved? The most surprising development came 3 weeks after Sarah's truth video went viral. James Patterson posted a video of his own, shot in his front yard, standing next to his flagpole. "I've been thinking a lot about Mrs. Henley," he said, looking directly into the camera. "About her husband Robert, about what he meant to her, about how my flag must have looked to someone who spent 57 years protecting her husband's memory." James reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I did some research on Marine Lance Corporal Robert Henley. He died at Firebase Delta on March 15th, 1967, saving 3 wounded soldiers from a mortar attack. He was 20 years old. He left behind a pregnant wife and never got to meet his daughter. James paused, his voice catching with emotion. Mrs. Henley was protecting something sacred. She was wrong about my flag, but she was right about the importance of honoring our fallen. I can't be angry at someone for loving their veteran too much. What James did next stunned everyone watching. He walked to his front door and returned, carrying a brand new American flag, still in its packaging. Slowly, ceremonially, he lowered his memorial flag from Afghanistan and carefully folded it according to military tradition. "This flag will always be sacred to me," he said, holding the folded memorial flag against his chest. "But it belongs inside now, where it can be protected and honored properly." He raised the new flag to full staff, saluted it with military precision, then turned back to the camera. "Mrs. Henley, if you're watching this, I want you to know that your husband Robert was a hero, and any woman who spent 57 years protecting his memory is a hero too. I forgive you, and I hope you can forgive me for not understanding why my flag hurt you so much." The video received 4 million views in its first day and sparked a national conversation about veteran trauma, dementia, grief, and the complexity of honoring military service. But the real ending to this story happened away from cameras, away from viral videos and internet comments. 2 days after James posted his video, Dorothy Henley walked slowly across the property line between their houses, carrying her leather purse in one hand and a small potted plant in the other. James was watering his garden when he saw her approaching. They looked at each other for a long moment, this veteran and this military widow, both carrying pain that the other had unknowingly triggered. "I brought you something," Dorothy said quietly, offering him the plant. "It's rosemary, for remembrance." James accepted the plant with shaking hands. "Thank you, Mrs. Henley." "I'm sorry I hit you," she whispered. "I get confused sometimes, but I remember Robert, and I remember how much that flag meant to him." "I'm sorry my flag reminded you of sad things," James replied. "I never wanted to cause you pain." Dorothy looked up at the new flag flying from James's pole, then back at his face. "Will you tell me about your friend Marcus sometime? The one your old flag was for? I'd like that very much." They stood there in the morning sunlight, 2 people who'd become symbols of division in America's culture wars, finding peace in the simple act of understanding each other's grief. The viral video that made them famous captured 30 seconds of anger and misunderstanding. But the friendship they built afterward, away from cameras and comments and national attention, would last until Dorothy passed away peacefully in her sleep 18 months later, with James Patterson sitting beside her bed, holding her hand and telling her stories about brave soldiers who never made it home.